Hello there, Ramblers, and welcome back once more to Reese Rambles, my weekly podcast all about the latest comings and goings, movings and shakings, and indeed all the rest of it in the worlds of vintage and retro computing, gaming, and technology. Hope you're doing well out there, and of course, also, welcome to another weekend, a long weekend here in the UK. It's a bank holiday weekend, and that means that everything's shut on Monday. And there are many of us. Although I say us, obviously I'm self-employed, so we'll have to see how Monday goes. I'll probably be working in some capacity, but yeah, it's a time when many people have the day off, of course, and get to enjoy a 3-day weekend. And apparently the weather's actually going to be pretty good. It has been a bit cooler in this past few days, but apparently it is still going to be nice and warm. But anyway, you're not here for the weather forecast and my weekend plans. You are here for some retro and vintage computing and gaming news, whatever that means. So I'm going to dive straight in. And the first big story this week is about this new mini Vectrex console. So, of course, if you remember the Vectrex from the 1980s, no, probably not. It certainly wasn't a big seller. It was quite a specialist thing. It had the actual monitor built into the console itself, and that was because it used a vector screen. So yeah, quite an interesting technology as far as CRT screens go. Of course, there were some arcade games that used that same technology. Some of the Atari Star Wars games and Missile Command and stuff like that. Asteroids, I think that was Vector Monitor as well. And of course, that's made it quite a difficult system to emulate over the years, and a difficult system to kind of recreate as a reissued thing, because the screen was such an integral part of the experience of that console. So yeah, quite surprising to see that a mini version of this console has been announced. Now, they are using an AMOLED screen, an active matrix OLED screen in this thing, and I will say, based on stuff like RetroArch and some of the emulators and stuff, there have been some quite good, quite convincing effects at recreating these screens on modern monitors, and particularly with HDR screens and stuff like that. We're getting quite close to coming up with some quite convincing CRT effects. It's something that I have reported on in the past here on Reese Rambles. So you never know, and actually they are showing this thing at Gamescom. I will say I'm referring to a story on timeextension.com here for my information. Full credit due there, but yeah, they're showing this thing off at an exhibition called Gamescom, and the feedback from the people that have seen it in real life has actually been surprisingly positive. So that's always good. And this is actually a brand new company that have somehow acquired the rights to the Vectrex, and they're actually trading under the name Vectrex Official. And they're going to be running this thing as a Kickstarter next year as well. So that's quite interesting. It does look like a very nice piece of hardware, doesn't it? So we'll go through and we'll read the story for the benefit of my audio listeners. So while 80s rivals such as the Atari 2600 and Intellivision fought for domination of the TV, the Vectrex offered gamers something different. It came with its own built-in screen, capable of producing vector graphics like those seen in arcade titles like Asteroids. Sadly, it wasn't a commercial success, but it has retained its appeal with retro collectors over the decades, so much so that it's now getting its chance at micro-console fame. I will say, just to interrupt this story, something just popped into my head. My local town of Leicester here in the UK, in the Midlands, when I was a kid, I used to spend quite a lot of time bumming around in the town in the weekends, as you do, avoiding my parents. And I used to go into Leicester for guitar lessons with a friend of mine on a Saturday morning, and then spend the rest of the day, just hanging around penniless and looking through shop windows and things. And there was a retro shop, quite a cool retro shop that had loads of old games and stuff. And whenever I think of the Vectrex, I think of the Vectrex that they had on display in their window, and it was always there. It was there for years and years. In fact, I think when the shop eventually shut down, it was actually still in the window. They never sold it. And even back then, and this would have been, 25? God, it doesn't bear thinking about, does it? 25 years ago, something like that. Even back then, I think it was like £300 or something. I mean, it was all boxed and complete and in nice condition. But yeah, for some reason that memory always pops into my head when I think of the Vectrex. But not a console I've actually played at all in real life. They are that rare and unusual. Anyway, let's continue with the story here on Time Extension. So it seems like a new company founded by Flynn's Generation and Neo Retro. Is that a retro? Is that a typo? I don't know. Neo Retro has picked up the rights to the system and is launching via a Vectrex Mini. It's even showing the prototype off at Gamescom 2025. And we've got some photos here, which is really cool, on their official Twitter account. I can't be doing with clicking through to that, whatever. You can see them there. And quite excitingly, there is also a video of this thing in action playing an asteroids type game. Now, forgive me, I'm not all that familiar with the back catalogue of the Vectrex, but yeah, it had this very nice kind of monochrome vector screen, and it had the overlays as well. The plastic overlays that actually clipped on over the screen to add additional graphics and colours and things, which was a trick that was quite common in the arcades as well back in the day. And this video seems to show one of those as well. So evidently the games will be available, and you'll be able to get the clip-on overlays for those, because of course they are quite an important part of the experience, quite an immersive part of the experience. And they've also confirmed that it will feature HDMI out, as well as a micro SD card slot, and that will allow you to load up more games. So yeah, there have been quite a lot of homebrew games on the Vectrex over the years, and I must admit this did kind of pique my interest. So I went over to Wikipedia just to have a look at the list, and there were actually 28 games officially released for the Vectrex. Of course, they were cartridge based. And this list also includes homebrew games that were released, have been released from 1996 up until the present day. So there isn't a total number here, but if you have a scroll through the list, there is quite a lot of stuff. But of course, because of the nature of this console, quite a lot of games that were exclusive to that system and didn't really appear on other systems. So perhaps of interest to collectors for that reason. Like I say, it's not a console that I am all that familiar with, although there are some familiar names on here. You know, we have a version of Pole Position, for example, one of my favourite games on the Atari consoles. I think I saw, what else did I see on here? Berserk, presumably that's the same as obviously the Atari, the game made famous on the Atari consoles, that kind of thing. Coming at this from an Atari angle, as I am very much an Atari guy. There were some unreleased games as well over the years. Of course, the console wasn't a massive commercial success, so there were games that were kind of in development that never saw the light of day. So there's a few of those that have kind of come out over the years and you know, made their way out into the world. And a huge list here of homebrew titles. So there's all sorts of really interesting sounding names here as well. And of course, you can download these ROMs, and you can load them up on a micro SD card, and you can play them on this new Vectrex Mini, which is perhaps the most authentic way to experience them outside of the original hardware with a flash cart. And I do believe there is a flash cart available for the Vectrex. So yeah, it's a console that's always been a bit mysterious to me, and one that I've not really known much about. Let's just click on this and show some of this in action, some of their stand at Gamescom. Very professional looking setup they have here. They've got all the branding and stuff, and they've got a real Vectrex on display alongside their mini consoles. They are very cute alongside the original, aren't they? The Vectrex development team in France is made up of enthusiasts, engineers, designers, and programmers to imagine solutions to revive Vectrex today, says the company's official site. The team is dedicated to the promotion and conservation of Vectrex. To make the Vectrex Mini a reality, many suppliers and stakeholders around the world are giving their best to realise the vision of our engineers. And a Kickstarter campaign is planned for next month, and you can register your interest here. And there is indeed a link to the official Kickstarter, and you can fill in your email address, and you'll get an email when that goes live. So that's all very cool. And of course, if you are interested in that, the links will be down below in the usual places. So a rather interesting story next, which has been shared over on my Discord server this week, all about the compact disc, of course, the CD, much loved music format that, of course, went on to also hold data and even video CDs, and perhaps even become the basis or the inspiration for DVDs and Blu-rays and everything else going forward. That's, of course, that's a lovely, shiny compact disc format, and the CD has celebrated an important anniversary this week, although it's a bit of a weird one, bit of a weird number, but I thought this story was quite interesting, and there's some really interesting stuff in here about how CDs were invented and how they came to be, and a bit of history behind them as well. So if you're looking for something interesting to read and CDs are your bag, I can highly recommend this article over on Tom's Hardware. So the first commercial compact disc was created 43 years ago today. Nearly 1 billion CDs were shipped per year in the early 2000s. And this is a story by Mark Tyson over on tomshardware.com. And today marks 43 years since the first commercial compact disc pressing. Polygram in Germany is credited with pressing the first copies of ABBA's The Visitors on this date back in 1982. The CD format would take off in a direction which would have been highly unexpected at the time, ending up as a foundation of the multimedia PC age. However, CDs didn't kill the audiophile thirst for vinyl, and on the flip side, some artists are still releasing CDs even in the 5G and fiber digital streaming age. Now, I will say, just to veer away from this story and go on a bit of a tangent for a moment in this way that I do, it was interesting to read here that the very first commercial music CD was The Visitors by ABBA, because I always thought it was Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms, and I actually I searched this article for Dire Straits and there was zero mention of it at all, and I always thought that that was a very important milestone in the history of the music CD, and it turns out that I'm actually not a million miles away with that. This is, I actually found a story over on The Guardian, and it turns out that Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms album was the first CD to sell over 1 million copies. So, given that Dire Straits had made their name by offering a smartly dressed hybrid of jazz and blues right in the middle of the new wave era, they weren't the band you'd expect to be in the vanguard of new technology a few years later. Yet their fifth album, Brothers in Arms, musically rather poppier than usual but hardly cutting edge, was the one that introduced the public to the compact disc, and consequently became the first album to sell 1 million copies in the new format, helped by another innovation, the cutting-edge animation employed in the video for the album's big hit single, Money for Nothing. Of course, I've got to move these microwave ovens. That wonderful, I remember seeing it on MTV back in the day. But yeah, so it doesn't actually mention what year that was. So, 1985, there we go. So May 1985. So the first CD to sell 1 million copies. But yeah, I thought that was actually the first commercially available music CD. But there you go. A bit of a diversion there. Anyway, back to the Tom's Hardware story. And among the first prototype CDs, a format with an 11.5 centimetre diameter was capable of storing an hour of music was an early frontrunner. Philips apparently had a production line ready for such silver coasters. However, the final 12 centimetre diameter and 74 minutes capacity was apparently favoured as it was sufficient for a complete recording of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, Sony president Norio Ogur's favourite musical opus. And yeah, this, I will say, I'm not going to sit here and read this entire article because it is quite in-depth and quite interesting, but, it does go into some of the decision-making behind the CD. And yeah, so the first CDs were 11.5 centimetres in diameter, and they decided to increase that to 12 so they could fit 74 minutes on there, so they could fit a complete recording of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. And funnily enough, the Guardian article that I just mentioned that talks about about Dire Straits being the first million-selling CD does also mention that the earliest market for CDs was classical music. So yeah, very interesting indeed, and of course, a format that's starting to see a bit of a resurgence and a bit of a comeback as well in recent years. Of course, we've had vinyl, we have had some bands releasing some stuff on cassette and whatever. I think that's more about nostalgia and trying to stand out than anything else, because I don't think cassettes have many redeeming features, if I'm honest. Apologies to Techmoan fans in the comments. But there you go. So the first commercial compact disc was created 43 years ago this week. Bit of a weird anniversary. Obviously, we tend to celebrate, maybe the 40th or the 45th. But hey, it was posted over on my Discord, and I thought this article was really interesting. So go over to Tom's Hardware, give that a bit of a read over the weekend, and learn a bit more about the history of the compact disc. Another week, another Doom story. One of my favourite games of all time, of course, if not the greatest game of all time. id Software's 1993 first-person shooter, and of course a game that went on to spawn a series of much-loved sequels, and a series that is indeed still going today. Although I will say, this is something that I haven't actually mentioned since I was talking about the launch of the latest instalment. I will say I haven't actually got around to playing the Dark Ages yet. The latest instalment in the Doom franchise just didn't really appeal to me for some reason. I'll probably get around to it at some point, but apparently my game of choice at the moment is the new Tony Hawk's Pro Skater remake. Both 3 and 4, which was the newly released one, and 1 and 2, which was the previous one. Anyway, of course, I have my infamous collection of Doom paraphernalia and games and things over here in the form of the Doom Shrine, which has to get a shout-out pretty much every week here on Reese Rambles. But you can't actually see it this week because there is this monitor in front of it, which is kind of related to the video I've been working on for my main channel. Yes, that's right. I am still working on videos on my main channel. I appreciate it's been a while. I have had some issues and I've run into some problems with some of the stuff that I've been working on, but I am getting there. I promise. Hopefully there will be something this month. But anyway, of course, the topic at hand is Doom, and running Doom on pretty much anything and everything. It's not a week goes by that someone, without someone porting Doom to some weird and wonderful new platform. Personally, myself, I, of course, made my rather popular video about running Doom on office furniture on the desk PC, which you also can't see next to me. Very unprepared of me, having this monitor in the way, but there you go. But that doesn't really count, does it? Because it's essentially just a PC. It just happens to be built into a desk. But hey, I like to think that I did my bit. Well, the latest device to have Doom ported to it is over on this YouTube channel called Aaron Christoffel. And yeah, indeed, Aaron has ported Doom to an Anker charging station. So this is a USB charging station, which has a nice big full-colour OLED screen on the front. And it has a little knob on the side for navigating the menus and things. And it turns out that actually that's enough input for actually being able to play the game. So we can see some footage of it running here. It's... I mean, when it's actually moving backwards and forwards, it's quite smooth. But yeah, this kind of click wheel, this potentiometer input does kind of hamper the gameplay a little bit as far as like turning and things are concerned. But hey, the game's up and running and playable, and you can see some footage here of him running around E1M1, the first level, shooting some bad guys. So we've actually got some information here in the video description. We've got the specs of this charging station. So it has an SoC, which is a Cinewit SWN34S. It has 8 megabytes of SD RAM and 16 megabytes of external flash, which of course is plenty for Doom. 8 megabytes of RAM is more than our first 486 PC had back in 1995 or whenever it was. My first experience of the shareware episode of Doom only had 4 megabytes. And it has a 200 by 480 pixel LCD, so it's quite a widescreen kind of aspect ratio. Of course, designed to show charging status and stuff like that. Absolutely not designed for running games, so quite a cool project, this. And there is indeed apparently quite the hacking community around this device, around this Anker charging station. So yeah, Aaron Christoffel successfully ported Doom to a Cinewit SoC with 8 megabytes of RAM and got it up and running on this charging station. Now, of course, being a USB charging station, this does have USB ports on the front. So you would think, why not just connect a USB keyboard or USB mouse or whatever? But apparently that's not possible. You are limited to using the built-in wheel control, jog wheel control for controlling the game. But hey, doesn't make it any less technically impressive. Just makes it pretty impractical for actual playing. But hey, practicality has never been a big concern of ours, has it? It's just cool to see somebody making something do something that it was never designed to do. And the fact that it's Doom just makes it all the better. So, as you are no doubt aware, I am a huge Atari fan. I am sat here looking at my collection of Atari 2600, Atari Jaguar 7800 ST games and consoles and things. I've got my 5200 down there. I've got my Lynx up on the shelves there as well. Of course, you can't see any of this, but rest assured it is there and it will be featured in a video at some point. I have actually been reconfiguring my shelving and stuff over the past couple of weeks for reasons. Yeah, there has been a big announcement from Atari, from modern day Atari this week. And of course, it would be remiss of me to not report upon this story. So this is a new game that's coming out, as you might imagine. And it is a new installment in a much-loved franchise. And perhaps not quite as loved as Doom, I will say. But yeah, it's Bubsy. It's Bubsy, okay. And I have here the Atari Jaguar version, the Atari Jaguar Bubsy game. Of course, it was a series that spanned a few different consoles. I think quite a few people played the PlayStation games. And yeah, to me, Bubsy has always been a Jaguar thing and always something that I've very closely associated with Atari. And it's been a bit of a running joke over the years, kind of the quality of this as a mascot platformer, if you like, compared to the likes of Mario and Sonic and stuff like that. Croc, which I reported on quite recently. Croc always makes me chuckle. But yeah, Atari kind of tried to take on Bubsy as the mascot for the Jaguar. And yeah, we all know how well that went. Although, to be fair, big improvement on Trevor McFur, if you are familiar with that game. But there is a new one, is the point that I'm trying to get to. And Atari are very much aware of this game's reputation, and they are very much kind of incorporating it into the humour of the game and into its marketing as well, which I think is quite a smart move. And I must say, this trailer did make me smile. So let's have a look at this. This is over on the official Atari YouTube channel, of course. And we have Bubsy the cat. We've got this kind of cel-shaded style. We've got some clips of some of the older games, of course, and a bit of a kind of a knowing nod to, like I say, that reputation. But actually, once it starts to get into the story and the gameplay and stuff, it's a 3D platformer. And, I think it was quite reminiscent, particularly the music in this as well. I thought was quite reminiscent of stuff like Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast, which I actually enjoyed quite a lot, I will say. And yeah, it's very much a game in that kind of vein. So apparently it is craft themed. So you've got stuff like wool and knitting needles and craft related things, cardboard stuff and construction. We've got some bobbins or whatever you call them. So that's quite an interesting kind of take on the series. And yeah, I really don't know what to make of this. It actually looks quite promising, I think. It could end up being well, a load of bobbins, I guess. I didn't even practice that one, didn't even rehearse that one. Very well done there, Reese. There is an official website or official page on Atari's website as well that you can go and have a look at here that does have some more information. So join Bubsy on an intergalactic platforming adventure. The infamous wisecracking Bobcat has returned to 3D with new challenges, new moves, and even more personality. Very good. I see what you did there. Run, jump, glide, and roll across alien planets, battle robotic sheep, and collect tons and tons of yarn. What could possibly go wrong? Bubsy's long-standing enemies, the fleece-obsessed woolies, have stolen all of the Earth's sheep. Oh well, that ain't Bubsy's problem until the sheep return as deadly barbots, empowered by woolly technology to steal the golden fleece. Turning animals into robots. I wonder what big popular mascot platformer we've seen that concept in before. But anyway, Bubsy must... Why am I scrolling up and down like this? Come on, Reese, get it together. Bubsy must journey through space to stop the barbots and reclaim the fleece with the help of his motley crew of acquaintances. Luckily, Bubsy has acquired new skills to navigate the craft-themed levels. He can leap, glide, flip, claw up walls, and pounce off enemies. He can also puff up into a new hairball form to roll up blistering speeds. Again, Sonic. The team at Fabraz crafted this expressive new moveset to cater to beginners and speedrun enthusiasts alike. Very interesting. 3D platforming adventure in space. Got some screenshots here, of course, taken from that video. And it also has online leaderboards, apparently. So it's going to be released on the PlayStation 5, the Switch, the PC, the Xbox, and Epic Games Store, GOG, and Steam, as far as PC is concerned. Atari kind of churning out the games just lately. Of course, a lot of kind of retro revivals and things. Yars Rising, which was a very weird reimagining of course, Yars on the Atari 2600, one of the kind of big names on that console, and kind of took it in a rather strange kind of anime-inspired direction. But good on them for doing something original with the franchise. But as far as Bubsy is concerned. Of course, this is a very kind of self-referential, self-aware take on the series, and why not? Why not? It's Bubsy. Hey, we might get a half-decent game out of this. I think the gameplay and the graphics look actually quite interesting. It'd be interesting to keep an eye on this. So as far as release date is concerned, all we've got is a coming soon. But hey, maybe I'll play it when it does eventually land. Or maybe I'll just add it to the pile. It seems more likely, doesn't it? Last week, I reported on much-loved franchise The Settlers, and of course, the story that The Settlers 2, the second, oddly enough, in that series, would be coming to the Amiga, finally, a platform which, unfortunately, didn't get that game back in the day. Now, I did report at the time that, of course, you would need an accelerator or a 68030 CPU in your Amiga to be able to play that, which is perhaps part of the reason why they decided not to release it on the Amiga back in the day, because, of course, those kind of higher-end, faster Amigas were relatively rare compared to stuff like the A500 and the 600, of course. But yeah, speaking of those kind of higher-end Amigas, and indeed of the Settlers too, there has been some news this week about the A1200, which of course is coming apparently at some point, one day, eventually, maybe, from Retro Games Limited. Now, of course, I'm not going to dive into the murky details of Retro Games Limited, but yeah, I thought this was rather bizarre, this announcement here. So they made rather a big thing about this a few days back on Twitter, and they posted this big announcement saying that Retro Games to offer first glimpse of its next machine at Gamescom 2025. Retro Games Limited, RGL, a leader in retro gaming hardware and play on replay. Of course, the people who we know from, say, the Atari 2600 Plus, one of my favourite things ever. A global publisher and developer of classic video game software and consoles, will give fans and media their first ever glimpse of the company's next full-size retro machine at Gamescom 2025. Now, it does go on to say that the full reveal will be in October, and this kind of early glimpse at Gamescom won't include any technical specifications or price or release date. Still, at this point. Although what we do know about this machine is that, of course, Retro Games Limited did previously do the A500, which was a kind of mini software emulation-based, ARM-based system, a mini version of the Amiga 500. Of course, they don't have the rights to use the Amiga name on any of this stuff because the whole Amiga licensing situation is even messier than the actual Commodore licensing situation, which we have talked about quite recently with, obviously, Perifractic's acquisition and whatnot. But they have said here that the new system will be displayed alongside an atmospheric teaser trailer designed to spark curiosity and conversation. So should we take a look at what they actually displayed at Gamescom? Because, I don't think this is what people were expecting. So a full-size Amiga 1200 remake is hiding out at Gamescom and it could solve my retro microcomputer woes, reports Phil Hayton over on Games Radar. And there are some photos here from Future, apparently. Not from the future, but from Future Publishing, of course, who do all the magazines and whatnot. And clicking on this and just having a closer look at this seems to be quite a poor quality 3D print of a full-size Amiga 1200, the A1200. I mean, as far as replicas go, it looks absolutely spot on. Of course, all the details are there, but when you actually have a look at a kind of close-up of this case, I think the quality of the printing and whatnot does kind of leave a little bit to be desired, which I thought was quite surprising, really. Considering they put out this big announcement saying that people would finally have a chance to actually see this thing in person and get hands-on with it. But yeah, I suppose the new piece of information, as alluded to at the beginning of this story, is that it will be bundled with that new version of the Settlers 2, which is really cool. And of course, a selection, which I believe is still to be announced, of classic Amiga games, presumably leaning more towards the side of the higher-end kind of later games that took advantage of the A1200 and its rather beefy hardware. But there you go. Oh, it also has reportedly has a fully working keyboard as well, which is a first for one of these mini computers, these mini consoles. Of course, it's a full-size replica. I don't know why I keep describing it as a mini computer, because it's not. It is a full-size replica. But yeah, fully working keyboard as well, which is really cool to see, and presumably compatibility with all of the original peripherals, joysticks and mice and stuff like that. And the story here on Games Radar does kind of go on and talk a bit about, obviously, the kind of recent revival of Commodore and some of their projects. And, of course, as reported here on Reese Rambles, the Perifractic's attempt to revive Commodore and acquire that as well. But, of course, that doesn't include any of the rights to any of the Amiga stuff, because that was split off in the 90s and sold to other people. And as has been the case with the Commodore brand itself, there's also been quite a lot of kind of infighting and legal tussles over the years as to who actually owns what bits of the Amiga brand as well. So hence the delays with the A1200. And hopefully they managed to kind of pull this together. To be honest, I'm not really in the market for this thing, but I thought it was quite interesting and a bit bizarre, really, that they made such a big noise about having this thing on display and then showing off what appears to be just not even a very good 3D print. But there you go. One company whose work is a regular feature in these rambles pretty much every single week is, of course, Nightdive Studios, known for their rather excellent remasters of various first-person shooters over the years, specifically. So we're talking stuff like Doom and Quake and Dark Forces. If you haven't played their remaster of Dark Forces, do go and play it. It is one of the greatest first-person shooters of all time, and you don't have to be a Star Wars fan to appreciate it. I can say that with some authority because I'm not really a Star Wars fan. Apologies. Yeah, of course, they've been churning away, releasing their various remasters using their Kex engine, and pretty highly regarded stuff as well. New episodes, new content, minor tweaks and balancing and things, but generally very respectful of the original source material. And I think they do fantastic work. I've bought pretty much every single thing they've released. And on that note, over the past couple of weeks, of course, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but I reported that at QuakeCon that they had dropped this surprise release of Heretic and Hexen, the various games in the, or at least the first two Heretic and Hexen games, and the various expansions and episodes and missions and things. And I have been playing that. I've been playing my way through Heretic for the first time ever. I think I attempted way back in the day when it was still reasonably current. I think I had a look at it, and even as a huge Doom fan at the time, I think the kind of the fantasy setting and stuff didn't really appeal to me all that much. I just never really got into it for some reason. But I will say I am enjoying it quite a lot now. I will also say that I think the weapons are all kind of much of a muchness, really. And the same pretty much goes for the enemies as well. Not kind of all that much variety in the weapons and the enemies, I don't think. I generally find myself just using whatever weapon I happen to be holding at any given time till it runs out of ammo and it automatically switches to the next one. And I just kind of end up cycling through them forever like that, rather than using specific weapons for specific areas and enemies and things like that. But perhaps that's just because I don't know that game very well. But hey, the level design, while quite big and complex and convoluted, certainly for a game based on Doom, I think is actually quite good, although often quite confusing. And of course, you've got those power-ups and things as well, that inventory system where you can go pick up these power-ups and go through and activate them at your leisure, which was actually quite innovative at the time. So really interesting game, and looking forward to slowly working my way through the rest of it, and of course checking out Hexen as well, the sequel to that. But of course, with that out of the door, it's up to Nightdive to perhaps ponder what they might want to work on next. Now, of course, I think it's probably fair to assume that they are working on stuff that's going to be out at some point in the future. There have been some rumours about Heretic 2, I think. And, of course, hey, perhaps something a bit more ambitious, like a proper remake of Doom 3, maybe. It'd be quite cool to play through that game again. I know, a completely different game in the Doom franchise. But anyway, in this interview with Nightdive's CEO, he has once again mentioned one of his favourite games of all time and how he would quite like to get his hands on it again. And actually do a proper remaster of it. And this is a Nintendo game that's quite obscure. So I thought this was quite interesting. Now, this is a story over on nintendolife.com by Ollie Reynolds. Nightdive's CEO reiterates desire to remaster Eternal Darkness. And it's been kind of locked behind the GameCube/Nintendo wall all this time. That is a quote from the interview. This is an interview with Shack News, I will say. And I must admit, I haven't had time to actually sit and watch this interview, but I am going to check it out because, like I say, I'm a big fan of Nightdive as a company and all the stuff that they put out. So, of course, this will be linked in the usual places. So, Nightdive Studios CEO Stephen Kick has once again reiterated his desire to remaster Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem, or at the very least see some sort of re-release, originally released on the GameCube in 2002. If you remember back in 2022, Kick posted on social media to state that Nightdive had been involved in discussions with Nintendo about remastering some of its games, but noted that the company was gun-shy about working with third-party developers. No surprise there. He followed up by saying that Eternal Darkness is #1 on my list. And now, in a new interview with Shack News, Kick once again mentioned Eternal Darkness as one of the games high up on his so-called bucket list of titles to remaster. At the very top is the 2000 FPS title, The Operative, No One Lives Forever. And I must admit, when I saw this story pop up, that was the first game that I thought of as well, from Monolith Productions, a game that may well prove difficult to revisit, thanks to complications around the IP rights. And here's what Kick said about Eternal Darkness. I will say there's another game really high on that list, and that would have to be Eternal Darkness. It's kind of been locked behind the GameCube/Nintendo wall all this time, and it's something that I would personally love to see get re-released. And that quote is, of course, completely and utterly redundant because I've already given you all of that information over the course of this story. So I thought, yeah, like I say, when I saw this story pop up, it did remind me of No One Lives Forever, which was an FPS that was released back in the year 2000 by Monolith Productions. And you play as this kind of female spy character, but I've never actually played this game. I've seen playthroughs of it, videos of it, and I've seen screenshots of it and stuff as well. But this one completely and utterly passed me by. And considering I was really into stuff like Half-Life and Doom 3 and Deus Ex and stuff like that, I think this would have been very, very much up my street. But yeah, it's a game I've been wanting to check out, a game I've been meaning to check out. Quite rare and unusual to see boxed copies of this. I don't think it was a really big seller at the time. And there is a page for it on GOG.com, but it's just a voting page. It's not actually available to buy, so you can't even buy it from GOG. So yeah, not quite sure how I'm going to check this one out. I guess I'm going to have to either try running it on period hardware, I guess, or perhaps I am using Bazzite now, Bazzite Linux full-time on my gaming PC. So yeah, obviously there are various ways like Lutris and stuff like that for running these old games, which I have tested with rather some success over on my main channel. So perhaps that's how I could check it out. But yeah, a Nightdive remaster would be the ultimate, wouldn't it? It would be the dream. So there we go. Yeah, if any of you are fans of that particular game, I think there was a sequel as well, wasn't there? There was No One Lives Forever 2. Yeah, if you're fans of that and do you know anything about it, please do let me know. And if you know the best way to play it, please do let me know, because it is a game I'd very much like to check out. Some politics for you next, I'm afraid, but this has been big news in the UK in the past couple of weeks, and it has also been a big topic of discussion on my Discord server. And of course, it's something that's kind of affected a lot of us in some way or another, because this does seem to be popping up all over the place. Indeed, also on Discord itself, and could actually end up being a problem for YouTube as well. So yeah, of course, the galaxy brain people that run our country decided to introduce this new law called the Online Safety Act. And as you might imagine, the whole thing is very much half-baked and has caused no end of problems for people. So just for those of you perhaps outside of the UK, or those in the UK who've been living under a rock, or perhaps blissfully living offline, which I must say, I can't blame you. Just a recap of what this thing is all about. So this is about preventing access to adult material for those underage internet users on devices and whatnot. So quite well-meaning, although there were already mechanisms in place for this. If you have a mobile contract, for example, you do have to prove that you are over 18 to get access to certain websites. So there was already a mechanism in place for this, but the UK government decided that they would just go all in on it and do full-on facial recognition, age verification, and of course, if that fails, you have to submit scans of documents, passports, and driving licenses and stuff like that. The whole thing is a complete shambles, doesn't work properly, and yeah, you know, it's as you might expect. And yeah, anyway, so the big news this week, of course, was about Wikimedia Foundation, of course, most famously known for Wikipedia. And the headline here is Wikimedia Foundation challenges UK Online Safety Act regulations. Now, on Monday, the 11th of August, the High Court of Justice dismissed the Wikimedia Foundation's challenge to the UK's Online Safety Act categorisation regulations. While the decision does not provide the immediate legal protections for Wikipedia that we hoped for, the court's ruling emphasised the responsibility of Ofcom and the UK government to ensure Wikipedia is protected as the OSA is implemented. So they have recognised the significant value of Wikipedia, safety for users, as well as the damages that wrongly assigned OSA categorisations and duties could have on the human rights of Wikipedia's volunteer contributors. The court stressed that this ruling does not give Ofcom and the Secretary of State a green light to implement a regime that would significantly impede Wikipedia's operations. My goodness, you can tell it's Friday afternoon, can't you? And indicated that they could face legal repercussions if they fail to protect Wikipedia and the rights of its users. In order to achieve that outcome, he suggested that Ofcom may need to find a particularly flexible interpretation of the rules in question, or that the rules themselves may need amendment in Parliament. If the ruling stands, the first categorisation decisions from Ofcom are expected this summer. The Foundation will continue to seek solutions to protect Wikipedia and the rights of its users as the OSA continues to be implemented. Now, I will say that someone over on my Discord server, who shall remain nameless, did mention that they'd seen a headline somewhere that traffic to certain adult websites from the UK was actually down something like 47% since this was implemented. Now, of course, a lot of people are using VPNs to foreign countries and stuff like that because they perhaps quite rightly don't want to submit their personal details to the government and perhaps admit to some of the stuff that they're looking at online. But yeah, Wikipedia, of course, it's an encyclopedia, fantastic source of information. It's all crowdsourced. And I will say, just on a kind of a personal note, just to give my take on this, as a kid, I was a big encyclopedia reader. My parents got me all kinds of science books and stuff like that. And I used to absolutely devour them. I used to read them cover to cover, learning all about everything from, space travel to, weird mathematical concepts, weird historical stuff, and of course things like, human reproduction and stuff like that at a tender young age. And, in fact, it actually got to the point where my parents sat me down to have the old birds and the bees talk with me, as they do, and they said, do we really need to have this talk, or, do you actually kind of know all of this already from the books that you've been reading? And, we kind of managed to forego that talk, although I think it came as a much bigger shock to my sister a couple of years later, who very much wasn't the bookworm that I was. But anyway, that's an aside. But of course, it is an important point because this is educational. This is, it's not hardcore smut or anything like that. Now, I appreciate that, Wikipedia does have some articles that do go into detail on some stuff that perhaps does kind of skirt the boundaries of that, and they do have some images and some descriptions and diagrams and things. Throwing the baby out with the bathwater, really, putting an age gate on an encyclopedia just seems completely and utterly insane to me. And the Wikimedia Foundation have quite rightly challenged this. And the government have actually quite rightly recognised that perhaps they should have some kind of exemption, and they are going to perhaps, they have advised officially that, something should be implemented somehow, but nobody's really suggesting how or why or when. And if they don't act, it could well be that access to Wikipedia is restricted in the UK until they can implement this. I also saw a headline that 4chan were actually refusing flat out to implement this as well. So that's a bit more of a militant approach, although perhaps to be expected from 4chan. Of course, kind of image board forum type place that has a bit of a reputation among certain circles. But yeah, it's insane. It's insanity here at the moment with the censorship and whatnot. I'm all for parents, having the right to protect what their kids see online and protect them from harmful stuff. But at the same time, there's access to information, education, freedom of speech, all that kind of stuff. And I do genuinely think that is very important. And that, age gating Wikipedia and having facial recognition and, submitting your ID and stuff just to be able to go and look up a list of Vectrex games, for example, which is what I was using it for only moments ago, is absurd. So yeah, what can I say other than that? Let's move on. An update to a story which I reported on previously, just a few weeks ago, all about light guns. Of course, those wonderful gaming peripherals, input devices, and they've always been kind of a fixture of arcade games and stuff, haven't they? Right, way back when somebody first worked out that you could detect where the CRT screen was actually drawing on the screen at any given time using a very basic light sensor. I think the technology started off as like light pens and things for business, for being able to kind of input stuff that way and draw stuff on screen. But it wasn't long, of course, until someone turned it to a gaming use and into a way of shooting people, as is often the way with the world of gaming. And of course, I think maybe the 90s was probably the peak of home light gun gaming, oddly enough, with stuff like the PlayStation. I remember playing the home versions of stuff like Die Hard Trilogy and Time Crisis and Point Blank and stuff like that on a friend's PlayStation, and it working really, really well. But of course, that was kind of the last gasp of CRT technology. And nowadays, we all have these flat panel things. And of course, those old school light guns just don't work with them because they work in a completely different way. And this is something that Nintendo tried to address with the Wii, of course, which is a console that gets a lot more coverage than I think it deserves on this channel. But an interesting console because it had that sensor bar that went on top of or underneath the screen that had the two infrared LEDs. And was very kind of forward-thinking of them, really, considering that the Wii was very much kind of a standard definition console and one of the last to kind of cling on to that previous SD era and that kind of era of CRTs. But of course, the Wii worked very, very well, and when games came along that required a bit more precision, Nintendo followed up with the Motion Plus add-on, I think it was called, for the Wii Remote, which added even more accurate motion tracking, which was quite cool and actually worked surprisingly well, as you might expect. But this whole issue of modern screens and light guns is a thing that people keep trying to solve with varying degrees of success. Of course, we've had the Sinden light gun, which was kind of one of the bigger ones of recent years, adds a border to the outside of the screen and then has a camera inside the gun that actually tracks that border, and that works reasonably well. I have had a play with one myself, and it's pretty good. But one thing that I did report on quite recently was kind of an official TV console light gun thing, which isn't really something that we've really seen much of in recent years. So it was quite noteworthy in that respect. But also the games that came with it and the fact that it was an official thing as well actually made it rather impressive, if indeed it does work. Well, there has been, finally getting to the point, a hands-on review of this that has dropped, and the initial feedback is looking very good indeed. So this is over on Insider Gaming, and this is called how do you even say that? I mean, game, I guess, is how you would pronounce that. G''AIM''E, the gamey, Gamey. Let's go with Gamey. Hands-on preview. Arcade classics are firing into modern-day homes, and as mentioned, the games are quite noteworthy with this particular system, because it comes with the Time Crisis games, the Point Blank games, and another series that I hadn't heard of, that I can't remember the name of. Steel Gunther, that's the one. So yeah, probably worth the price of admission just to be able to play those classic games in a rather accurate fashion. They are touting this as using AI. I'm not quite sure what they mean by AI, whether it's just a way of extracting some money from some venture capitalists. I'm not quite sure, but the story here, the review by Andrew Higton, does, of course, start off with an intro very similar to mine, talking about the history of light gun games. So if you're interested in that, definitely worth a read. And does talk about the G-Con controller, of course, for the PlayStation, as did I. But they are running a Kickstarter at the moment, and they are advertising the fact that this is usable on all screens, including plasma LED, QLED, and LCD. And it has hit nearly $1 million as of the time of writing, which has decimated its $50,000 target. And this is another preview from Gamescom this year. So this uses a high-resolution camera and clever AI system. It easily detected my gun, and after a brief setup to establish the calibration, I was off and firing. Literally, I got to roll back the years and play a flawless port of the original Time Crisis, considered to be the definitive light gun game and franchise. Not sure I could argue with that. I do like a bit of Point Blank myself, but the game screams action at me. I'm peeping in and out of cover, picking off bad guys, carelessly taking damage because I get too greedy, and my memory muscle is instantly restored. I was so engrossed by the action that I didn't really notice any desync or connectivity issues, which is great to hear. So when the Gamey launches, you can buy the system and gun, or you can throw in a pedal for good measure. Of course, in Time Crisis, you could stand on the foot pedal to hide behind cover and to reload as well, couldn't you? So that would be quite cool for the immersion. And it does actually go on to explain all of that. I'm just redundant at this point, aren't I? But Yeah, a very positive review here. This writer had 30 minutes hands-on with the system and basically described it as accurate and flawless. No desync issues, no lag issues, anything like that. Bit of a kind of a light review, I guess. Doesn't really go into too much detail and doesn't include any actual footage of this thing in action. But hey, you know, it's cool to see. Looks like, I've just spotted actually on the official promo image here, which is quite funny, that the black version of this is Japan only, and the rest of the world is going to be getting a blue and orange version. I guess that's to do with laws around imitation firearms and stuff, but anyway, that's just the ADHD kicking in. So yeah, a positive review of the G-Amy, perhaps the worst named light gun peripheral of all time. And this is definitely going into production. Of course, it's an official collaboration with Bandai Namco. And yeah, they've raised $1 million of their $50,000 Kickstarter, which is really cool. So, a bit of a reminder, I guess, that the Kickstarter does exist, and of course, this will be linked in the usual places if you want to go and check it out. But nice to see some modern incarnations of the light gun technology. Nice to see it working well. It's always a good thing. And that, my dearest ramblers, of course, brings us around quite neatly to my regular video of the week feature, wherein I feature a video, or indeed videos in this case, from the previous week that I have watched here on the old YouTubes that have enlightened or entertained or illuminated or educated or otherwise improved my life in some small manner. Sometimes they are vintage and retro computing and gaming related, and quite often they are not. A bit of a mixed bag for you this week, and I actually have quite a few videos. I have one video which you've probably seen, but I just wanted to talk about because it did amuse me rather a lot. And also a bit of a collection, a bit of a selection of videos. Perhaps a recommendation for a channel and maybe their recent output. So without further ado, let's jump straight into this one. Now, this is LGR Blurbs. Of course, I talk about LGR quite a lot. Obviously, I do chat to Clint, and he has done this this review of Atari's hot sauces. So these are actually made by a British company called Sauce Shed, oddly enough, and they are based on classic Atari games, specifically Atari 2600 games. They've got all the original branding, styled after the original boxes for those games. So as you can see on screen here, we've got hot sauces based on Adventure, Super Breakout, Pong Sports, Haunted House, Yar's Revenge. And Clint actually bought the entire selection and, of course, the entire collection. And he is quite well known for his love of spicy things. He's put videos up on his LGR Foods channel. I will say I'm not quite sure why he didn't put this on LGR Foods, but there you go. But he has put videos up in the past on LGR Foods of him eating like ridiculously hot chips and things like that. So not surprising at all that this would be his bag. But yeah, he actually reviews every single one, every single sauce in this Atari range. And some quite surprising results here, actually. I mean, this is a specialist sauce company, and they are actually well known for the kind of the quality of their sauces. So perhaps not that surprising, but yeah, just again, modern day Atari trying something a bit weird and actually pulling it off and doing it surprisingly well, which did surprise me. You know, I was aware of these sauces, but to be honest, it's not really something that I'd ever really considered trying. I do like a bit of barbecue sauce, or perhaps something a little bit mildly spicy, perhaps not on the level of some of the stuff that Clint eats. But yeah, it was a fun little video, 14 minutes and 7 seconds, just going through the entire range and trying them, and quite a bit of range here as well. They're not, you know, they're not all the same sauce in different packaging. They are kind of themed to go along with the games quite nicely, and you know, he actually ended up enjoying them rather a lot. So fun little video. But the main thing that I have been watching in the past week is Adam Savage's channel. So Adam Savage's Tested. Now, of course, Adam Savage, the guy from Mythbusters back in the day, I'm sure he needs no introduction, and he is a prolific YouTuber these days. So much so that I'd kind of his channel had kind of fallen off my radar at one point, and then when I actually went back to catch up with it, he had all of these videos that I ended up catching up on. But yeah, in this past week, he has been releasing a lot of videos from the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. And of course, he's quite well known as a big space nerd. You know, he's obsessed with all that NASA stuff and things like that. Built replica spacesuits and all the rest of it, and has done some quite interesting behind the scenes stuff with bits of NASA hardware over the years. So in this video, he's having a look at the Space Shuttle launch countdown clock, the original, which has been donated to the Air and Space Museum, and they're in the process of restoring this. And of course, he talks about how it all works and everything, looks at all the mechanisms and things in there. So that was quite an interesting video. The next one is this poke around a Space Shuttle engine. And, a very, very knowledgeable lady here who is restoring this thing for the museum, or at least kind of preserving it for the museum, explains how all the various different mechanisms and things work, and they kind of go over it together from very much from an engineer's point of view, and they kind of pick it apart and kind of explain how it all works. Of course, all based on very, very old technology, this stuff, like 1970s technology, just brute force engineering. And I love that kind of thing. I thought that was very interesting. What was the next one I watched? It was all about, they had a Blue Origin space capsule, and it was about how they kind of move these huge objects in and out of the museum, and some of the stuff that they have in the collection, and how they kind of preserve it and display it. Again, very, very knowledgeable people here talking about stuff that they're evidently very passionate about, which is always very good to watch. And finally, the last example that I have here, his top 5 favourite things in the museum, and he basically goes off on one waxing lyrical about these things and why he loves them so much. And the passion is very evident, as you might expect from Adam Savage. And just a brilliant TV presenter, very passionate, very knowledgeable guy, and I always enjoy watching his stuff. So I'm glad that his channel did come back up on my radar this week, and I've been gradually working my way through this series of videos from the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, like I say, in Washington DC. All quite short, all quite concise, but absolutely packed full of information, and just a nice watch as well. Nice, pleasant, wholesome watch. So there you go. They are my recommendations for videos of the week. How many do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5 videos for you this week. I think that's a new record. So, of course, I'll link to that, all of that stuff down below in the usual places. So you can go and check it out. And I think that's pretty much all I have for you this week, in fact. So, let's do any other business and roll the outro. So thank you ever so much for joining me once more for this week's Ramble. Of course, these go out every Friday at 2 minutes to midnight UK time on all of the podcast platforms, and indeed on my second channel on YouTube, youtube.com/Reese Rambles. And I just have a bit of a correction for you from a previous week's story, which was raised over on my Discord server. And of course, I strive for accuracy here, so I just thought I would give this a bit of a mention. This is Boom, this game for the Atari 2600, which is a kind of a Bomberman-inspired game, a bit of a clone of Bomberman, if you remember me talking about this last week. Now, at the time, I was very impressed with the way that this game looked. Let's just flip forward to some gameplay footage for those of you who weren't with us here last week. So as you can see, as far as the graphics are concerned, this looks absolutely brilliant for the Atari 2600. We've got this wonderful horizontal scrolling. We've got these lovely detailed sprites and things. And I actually kind of just dropped in kind of an off-the-cuff comment about this being the result of modern development tools and experience, and how this probably wouldn't have looked out of place in Activision's catalogue back in the day. But it turns out that this isn't quite all of it that it seems. There is some trickery going on here. So if you run this on the Harmony cart, which is the flash cart for the Atari 2600, it has an ARM CPU, a very basic ARM CPU inside it, which it usually uses for the menu systems and stuff. But developers of 2600 games actually have access to this ARM CPU and can use it as a coprocessor. So, as you might imagine, that's what Boom is actually doing. It's using the ARM coprocessor inside the Harmony cart to to offload some of the processing and stuff. So, yes, this is a very impressive looking Atari 2600 game, and I don't want this to detract at all from what the developers have achieved here, what Champ Games have achieved. I just wanted to mention that just in the interest of, kind of accuracy and just kind of clarifying that. So, thank you to Other Retro Matt. Apparently, it uses a technique called CDFJ bank switching, and it uses the ARM processor in the Harmony cart as a coprocessor. So there you go. Quite a technical achievement, I will say. I don't want anyone to take that as a negative thing. So that's all I have for you for this week's Ramble. So thank you ever so much for joining me. Of course, I'd like to thank the people over on my Discord server who have been discussing these stories and more this week. Other Retro Matt, Steve's Tech Shed, Sozzled, DBK, Hardly Morgan 71, and our good friend Menemo. So thank you ever so much once more for being wonderful members of my community. Of course, if you want to join that community, the link is down in the usual places, along with links to all of the other stuff that I've talked about this week. But that's all that I have for you for this week's Ramble. So thank you ever so much for joining me once more. And yeah, that's it. Bye.